So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us in the Life Online program, which is the wider Shlichim initiative. We have Shlichim mostly in the DMV area, but also people in other places of the country. And we do sessions all throughout the week. And thank you for joining me for a session about Chana Senesh, one of the most renowned not only Israeli pioneers, but also one of Israel's most powerful poets. And today we're going to look through her story through two different parallel lives. And it is about her story, and it's about also the story of Shlichut in general. She looked at herself as a shlicha, as sent through a specific purpose or intent. And I also found a lot of parallels with shlichut in general through the Jewish agency. Not that I'm comparing myself with the legendary Chana Senesh. I want to make it clear. But really in a very authentic place of the experience of going somewhere else and experiencing the internal conflicts. And I'll start by sharing the presentation that I'll be using. The presentation, all the quotes, everything is from the Chana Senesh Foundation, which is an Israeli organization. And they recorded everything. We'll talk in a minute about how everything was recorded. How do we know so much about this legendary character, and how she in general illuminated the past for us in a lot of ways. And she's one of she is giving one of the clearest testaments and documentations of Israelis start from the point of view of someone who came through the movements. Let's see. Let's open the chat so I'll have it on the side. I did not parachute into the US. Thank you. I like the ground. I barely like planes. I don't do bungees or roller coasters. Keep me as close to the ground as possible. I like that. So I divided it into 4 segments. And the first is the beginning, and then Eretz Israel, and then reality, and then Hungary. And all through that, I'll start with Chana, and then I'll stop and I'll share my own experience, and then we'll jump again to Chana, and we'll try and create as many similarities to our own lives and to struggles we're experiencing. To make this as engaging as possible. In general, at any moment, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and just stop me and share with us. For the person who just joined, I'm not sure who it was. Hello again, my name is Idan Sharon, and we're learning today about Chana Senesh. So let's dive right in. So we have 2 incredible pictures of Chana Senesh. I was absolutely surprised to see so many pictures when I was compiling this session. There are so many pictures of her as a child, as an infant, as a teen, as a soul. Like I won't spoil. So let's start reading. And our reading will include texts and poems that she wrote, and it's going to be quotes from her. We'll see soon from where, and it's going to be a general overview from an outside perspective, talking about Chana's life. So Chana was born in 1921 to a highly cultured Jewish family. Her father was a celebrated author and playwright and passed away when she was only 6 years old. Just a second. What? This is Anna Frank? No. This is her. This is her brother Giora. I know his picture. Okay, thank you for letting me know. Where was I? Ah, her father passed away at the age of 6. In those years, Hungarian Jewry enjoyed freedom and civil rights and scoffed at the idea of Eretz Israel. Her family was incredibly assimilated by her own records, as we'll see in a minute. And Chana's family was no different in that respect, and basically ignored Zionism. At the age of 13, she began writing a diary, which ends on the eve of her mission. We'll see what mission is that in a long time. This diary has been fully preserved and is a testimony of her life, her inner thought, struggles, decisions, and her uniqueness. And we'll talk about it in a moment about where exactly do we start engaging with Chana in general. This is her thoughts. And again, she was born 1921. That means she started the diary at 1934. And 2 years later, she's writing at the age of 15. She's writing, when I began writing a diary, I was determined not to blabber about boys as do other girls, but my diary is becoming like that of any other girl. Like she's already going through teenagehood, and yeah, like the diary itself is incredible, and it really gives you the perspective of back then, meaning all the doubts, all like the small things that look small, but in that age seem so groundbreaking and important and life altering. Everything was recorded there. Yet on the pages of that diary began a special chapter in the history of Zionism. Chana, a young girl, an outstanding athlete and student, writes about being influenced by Zionism and immigration to Eretz Israel. And she writes, everything in bold is what she writes. I don't remember if I have already told you, the diary, that I am a Zionist. I feel now that I am with all my heart a conscious Jew. I am proud of my Judaism, and I am committed to immigration to Eretz Israel and taking part in its buildup, in its upbuilding. And a year later, when she was 18, she writes, today is my birthday, and I'm 18. One idea occupies me continually, Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. There is but one place on earth in which we are not refugees, not immigrants, but where we are returning home, Eretz Israel. And let's start here. My upbringing was extremely secular. I grew up in Bet Shemesh, a small town right next to Jerusalem. And even though if someone would have told me like Chana Senesh, I would have known to say, yeah, she was of the pioneers, something. That was basically it. That was everything I knew about her. And that was also the level of engagement I had with Zionism and with Judaism. I was not aware of what I think of those. Like Judaism, I knew that I had a lot of internal conflicts. I was very anti-religion. But Zionism was like a place where like I define myself as Zionist, but I'm not sure I know what it means, and I'm not sure what it means about me. And the first place where I engaged with both Chana Senesh and Zionism and my Judaism was in my pre-military academy. That year after finishing high school, where for a year and a half I postponed my military service, and I started learning economics and politics and Zionism and ethics and Jewish history. And in that moment, there's an entire chapter where in a series of sessions called The Pioneers, we learn about Chana Senesh. And I think Chana was a great connection from a very raw, very similar point of view to what I had. We were both teenagers and we were both discovering new things about stuff that was constantly surrounding us. And we were becoming more aware of how it affects us and how we want it to be an active part of our lives. I'll stop here and let's go to Eretz Israel. Kazir here working in the farm. And we'll soon get to this poem. But the first thing we need to see is that less than a year later, like from 18, less than a year before she was 19, Chana had already arrived at the Nacha Agriculture School in Eretz Israel. A young, full of faith girl who had left everything and everyone behind and emigrated alone to fulfill her dream. Uh, and she went through the Zionist movement, a youth movement, and came to Israel. She left behind her brother Giora, who a year before went to go and study in France. I don't know what it was. I think it was agriculture, but I don't want to mislead you. And her mother, Catherine, who she shared a deep connection with, remained in Budapest. And 4 days after she arrives, and this is incredibly powerful, at last I am home in Eretz Israel. Meaning, even before coming to Israel, she still doesn't know anything, but she is looking at that piece of land as her home. And there's something incredibly powerful in the education that she's gone through and the mental process she went over with herself to get to the point where this is now her home. She's not saying I'm in Israel and I'm leaving my home. I am now home. And this is something completely that I'm looking at. I'm like, what? How? This is incredible. I'll return to that in a minute. From this point onward, she writes in her diary in Hebrew. And that's part of the process that we see with a lot of pioneer groups. Part of the founding of Israel is not just the basic infrastructure, the physical, but also the cultural structure. And at that moment, a lot of people let go of their entire personalities, their names, who they were in that other language, and they took on the new Hebrew names, and they spoke only in Hebrew. And people, if people would speak to you in other languages like Russian or Yiddish or whatever, they would not respond, or they would ask you to speak in Hebrew. So powerful was the need to create this new culture that everything from that point is different. And imagine being this foreigner, and now even your diary in person, you have to start writing in Hebrew. And like no one is looking through a diary, apparently, like we assume. But she is so dedicated to the process that she is wholeheartedly pushing herself through that. In her diary notes is reflected the change that occurs in the soul of the person who moves from tennis shoes on the courts of Budapest to the boots of the Nahalal cattle sheds. A few days ago, I noticed two things. A postcard which Ava, one of her friends, sent from a ball in Budapest, and my hands wounded by physical labor. For a moment, I asked myself whether it had not been but foolish romanticism, living my comfortable life and choosing the life of a worker. After a moment, my mind rested. Here in Eretz Israel, this is where I belong. Again, and like, just imagine that, getting a postcard from someone you know back in Budapest, and you look at yourself, and suddenly in a very basic way, you don't recognize yourself, like from this middle class person who was not engaged in some like high form of idealism, to abandon everything, anyone, your culture, your language, and you work the land physically. It's incredibly powerful, and it only takes her a moment of regret before she's saying, this is where I belong. uh, in Eretz Israel, those were days of building and creating, while in Europe, World War II raged, and with it, the final solution. This is not a quote, that's just bolded. I apologize. Um, and this is where we start talking, and Hannah is starting to become aware of what is going on. And we start a separate kind of arena, but for a long time, that arena is second. It's second to something else going on. So for a moment, we'll leave that, and we'll jump ahead. After completing agricultural school in Nahalal, which is in the north of Israel, Hannah had decided as to her future. Though her diary describes struggles and hesitation, her decision was clear-cut: to the kibbutz. She chose Sdot Yam, literally the fields of the sea, if for no other reason than because it was a young kibbutz on its way. And she writes, I was attached to the future of Sdot Yam, the tasks ahead of it, to be there at its beginnings. There's something very raw, it's starting something. And this is where I like to go back to my pre-military academy. I'm sitting in a class with 20 other teens who dropped everything, dropped their military service, postponed everything in their life, and are now spending sometimes a month or two without going back home in this very intense environment of sitting together and engaging with each other about politics, about our ideals, about what we care about, what are the topics that drive us. And in a lot of ways, we draw a lot of parallels to the kibbutz group, to the small group where you make decisions together. Like in my pre-military academy, you can't just leave the group to a day to the doctor. You have to sit with the small 20 people group, and you have to discuss whether it's okay that you're missing the schedule right there. And how does that affect the social aspects of leaving the group for those 3 or 4 hours? Meaning there's a very high level of intensity to the point where sometimes for an outsider, it's incredibly ridiculous. Nowadays, I'm looking back and I'm like, haha, do you remember the times where you prevented me from going to the doctor because you didn't want me to miss a session? It's in a lot of ways, it's like, it's insane. And that intensity is all consuming. And that is the intensity that Hannah is experiencing. Of course, in a much higher level, she did not go back home every 2 or 3 weeks, and she was experiencing the same culture, and she created the infrastructure. She was not there to experience as a participant. She was part of the raw beginning that is much harder and much more difficult and much more undecided. And if I take this here to the shlichut, to being a foreign emissary, I'll say that it's completely different. There's no place to parallel. Here she's saying, after 4 days in that country, I'm finally home. And I think my purpose as a shaliach is not to be here at home. I am here like as a teeny tiny mini, let's call it ambassador. And I'm not representing the state, but the culture. But her dedication and the differences that it parallels are also incredible to where I find myself. like the parallels of the state of living are so incredible also for me as a shaliach. I'm here in my studio apartment. I have an entire studio apartment for myself. In Israel, I would never be able to afford this apartment. Never in my life. This apartment costs like I don't know, something about 7,000 shekels a month, which is incredible. It's like you have to be incredibly wealthy in Israel to rent an apartment like that every month. And there are a lot of like small but powerful differences in the culture, like the fact that I can order stuff and it gets it after 2 days, where in Israel, I have to wait 9 months for it to come if it ever arrives. But 9 months or 6 months, it's the basic. So in a lot of ways, like I'm feeling less like Hannah in Israel and more like the opposite of someone who came from like the raw ground to a place of richness, of something already founded. And of course, there are a lot of exceptions, but I really found myself connecting to that moment. And it's very strange feeling like asking yourself, what did she feel out of place at her home? She's saying, I'm home. And she's saying, this is where I belong. When she's thinking about her life, she's thinking about leaving her parents, but she's like, she, it is incredibly strange. And I would think that it, I would never look at myself and say, right now, this is my home. And I'm looking at Bet Shemesh or at Israel as something foreign. Yes, Pookie, Miriam?
See, what are you calling me? Hookie?
Pookie, yes,
Oh, Pookie. Got it.
it's a family nickname.
That's fine. That's fine. Um, are you saying that you're considering staying here after your?
Absolutely not. That's what
Okay.
I'm not saying.
Okay. Just making sure. Just making
I,
sure.
I'm saying she thinks of it as her home, and I'm saying I am completely opposite of her. And
Okay.
though I find a lot of loved ones, and I've found incredible work here and incredible friendship, and even like an outside, like an American family,
Yeah.
uh, this is still not my home. If I have a home in America, it's this apartment. Like when I'm talking with my family, I'm saying I'm going home. I'm going home right now.
So from the last Zoom that I was on with you, what I'm hearing you say is she really never felt right or at home in Hungary. She knew that that was not where she belonged. And how she knew that, it clearly didn't come from her parents, but you know that feeling when this just doesn't, this isn't right. I don't know what is right, but this isn't it. And she found it very easily, apparently, when she got to what was then Palestine. Does that sound reasonable?
So yes, I'll like I think she grew up in a culture, and I think she definitely looked at her like at Budapest as her home. I believe in some point she was looking for something. She was looking for a way to define herself, and she found it. And the minute she found it, she wholeheartedly threw herself at it. And that's something that I completely like. I found the pre-military academy by complete accident. And the minute that I got there, I was so encaptured by the vision that in a period of a year, my family and myself saw incredible transformation, not only in myself, but in the way that we as a family are engaging with each other. And I think that's it. I think at that age, you're looking for something. And once you decide what it is, there's some sort of like the raw idealism of that age, especially in Israel, the pre-military academy. It's really a year to define yourself and to like I've never been outside of Bet Shemesh living anywhere else, let alone away from my family. And suddenly I'm surrounded by teens all across Israel coming together and living in this very intense socialist slash communist way of like I'm sharing a room with 6 other teens, and it's a teeny tiny compound, and it's somewhere in a parking lot. It's not even a building. Uh, so there's a lot of these that I see Chana, and I find myself in her, and I truly believe that that was an incredible part of the intent of the pre-military academy. They wanted you to find a parallel with the ancient by at least at that age for me, the ancient history of like 80, 90, 60 years ago, and find yourself in these pioneers of Israel, and to see that their struggle was your struggle. And we'll soon get to another segment. Uh, but I remember that reading texts by Hannah Senesh were one of the most powerful texts that I read in the pre-military academy. And to this very day, I like at every tour I did with my birthright groups, I always took them to the burial place of Hannah Senesh, and I always forced them to stop. And everyone who knows birthright knows their schedule is timed by the minute. But I always stopped, and I always had that incredible poem, which we'll soon read, in my mind and in my thought with them. Let's see, just a second. Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, when I look at this third to last paragraph where Hannah's at home in Eretz Israel, but you could see she still doesn't have inner tranquility if you look below. And now in her case, of course, she couldn't even communicate with her brother or her mother, but clearly her body and in some sense some spirit is in Israel, but her mind or something else, because her family, right, the people close to her are not there, they're elsewhere. And of course, knowing what she does, we know that she never completely leaves, right, that original home. And in your case, I assume you have a similarity here. I assume you also, that home is where, what's this phrase? A home is where family is? I don't know, I forget what the phrase is, but that it's really hard to leave that, as we see Hannah really never really fully did, right, as we know.
Jerry, you're completely taking me in, and I will absolutely there's a story Hannah wrote in her journal, which Luther's right, home is where the heart is. There's a story that she wrote that I'll be sharing in a moment, because it's incredibly powerful and it's touching all the points that you're talking about. The last thing we'll read here is the Germans are standing at the gates of Paris, and here it is still quiet. The sky is bright and blue, but where are inner quietness and tranquility? Meaning she's restless. With Giora, communication has been cut. And what about mother? I see her in my dreams at night. So she is calling Eretz Israel her home, but she still loves her family. It has nothing to do with that, and it really bothers her. And we are now, before we go on to a different part of Eretz Israel, I really want us to look at Halicha L'Keisaria, which may be her most infamous songs, to the point where, like in Israel, people don't know it's named Halicha L'Keisaria. They just say Shelo Yigamer Le'olam.
Idan, famous, not infamous, is saying it was bad. It's a famous song.
Famous, incredibly
famous. Thank you.
Thank you. So the song is Eli, Eli, Shelo Yigamer Le'olam, Hachol Ve'hayam, Rishrush Shel Hamayim, Berak Hashamayim, Tfilat Ha'adam. And I'm really excited it gets me emotional just to read that. But it's my God, my Lord, may it never end. The sand and the sea, the murmur of the water, the lightning of the sky, and the prayer of man. So it's really, she wrote this in a different context, but for me, it is really about the thankfulness for what is. And the song is called Halicha Caesarea, the walking to Caesarea, the city. And it is really like the powerful images of like, she is talking about nature and how nature is wonderful, but in that place of nature she's also looking at like the prayer of man, the hope of man, inspiration of man, that higher place of being. And this is it, I think, in all the different formal ceremonies in Israel, this is one of the best choices for a song that everyone knows and loves. But this is a very like simple and straightforward look at Chana Senesh, but there's more to it. And this is a part I called reality. And reality, after 4 days of calling it, this is my land, that's all nice and easy. But it's just that, it's just nice and easy. And here we go into a little bit of more complexity of what it means to be an outsider, what it means to be a pioneer, to be the first to do something. So let's read. In the kibbutz, Chana lived a creative existence of work and fulfillment. She had but little time for herself and her diary, but when she takes up pen, her special character is revealed before us, still uncertain, yet at peace with her deeds, searching for her way, hesitating, yet pacing confidently down the path she chose. She writes, 9 hours a day I stand and sew the and do the laundry. Sorry, it's not so. And do the laundry. And I ask myself if this is indeed all I can contribute. She is like I feel a lot of unused power in me. She is very reasonably bitching about doing laundry for 9 hours a day. I would I would immediately go back to Budapest or whatever. Like 9 hours a day of laundry, please. I can't do 9 hours like a month of laundry. That's why I have so many like clothes from secondhand, so I don't have to wear I don't have to use a lot of laundry. So there's a lot of complexities. And if I want to stop here for a second and talk about also the place of women in pioneer society. And there was a lot of empowerment of women, but there was also a lot of keeping them in their place, which is through like taking care of the children and cooking. And I think one of the most incredible moments I had was in the pre-military academy. We were sitting and we were reading a protocol of one of the meetings that they had in one of those pioneer groups. And and it says in the protocol how the women are complaining that their place are not to be the caretakers of the men who work in the field, and they too deserve to work in the field. And the men are like, fine, you want to work your hands until they're bleeding, literally bleeding? Fine. So the protocols allow us to take a look inside of that time's culture. And we see a feeling here that's very, very complicated. But let's continue with the quote before we finish analyzing her. Rosh Hashanah Eve, 2 years since I left home, mother. If I could talk to her, what would I say? I would have told her that yesterday I felt such stress. I could have cried. For two ways are before me: to find my private happiness and ignore the flaws around me, or invest myself in a destructive war for the things I believe to be true and good. And she's describing here a point where she is she's so physically tired of the labor, and she's so emotionally tired from the constant need to talk and work and labor, and there that is 24/7 nonstop. The work of renewing the country culturally, spiritually, physically is 24/7. And after 2 years, she still loves what she does, but it has come to, like, the honeymoon phase is over, and this is the like the work time you need to invest, and the routine is so incredibly hard, and to let go of everything, it's she is choosing between her comfort, her peace of mind, and the destructive war for the things that I believe in. It's in the Hebrew, it's the self-destructive war. It is in a lot of ways, and, and and this is where we're going to a different different quote for a different pioneer, that the redemption of the self comes in expense of the redemption of the general. Meaning you have in some way to let go of private happiness to find to solve the flaws that happen around you. And there is so much I can say here. I say that this image, as an 18-year-old reading this was incredible to read, like seeing someone who left everything and had showed so much uh, internal strength and power and idealism to read her writing her heart out and experiencing such breakage, such loss. It was incredibly liberating to see that, like, that powerful person, she also, like, she had her doubts and she had her struggles, and she pushed through them. Uh, and here I liked to go on to three different things. One of them is the story I said we'll talk about before. But let's start with a pre-military academy. The pre-military academy, you'll sleep maybe 3 hours a night. Really, every second of the day, you're either in a session or preparing another, like a city-wide event talking about tolerance, or volunteering with children or with elderly, or talking about that kind of political maneuver happening right now, or about gender, or about sustainability. It's always there. And it's incredibly tough. Like, sometimes you want to say, I want to quit. And in the second in the second part of the pre-military academy, it was another half year. The intensity was so incredibly powerful that every week someone else came in and say, I'm thinking about dropping out. I cannot handle it anymore. I love what we do here. I love everyone here, but it's so incredibly stressful, and it's like it's consuming my identity. I don't feel like I have my own place, my own time, my own thoughts. Like everything is like everyone's. And sometimes you need that break. And here's where we go to a story, and I think this is one of the most influential stories. I talked about Hannah Senesh being one of the most influential figures that I've read about, and I think it's because this story. And she wrote it in her diary. I couldn't find it. in my Pirkei Chalutzim, in my book here, which I use to gather all the sources. But it's her description of the diary, and she's walking after a day's labor. Karen first is writing, academy intensity sounds just like starting a kibbutz in the early. In a lot of ways, it is very intense, incredibly intense. It's part of what makes, specifically Rabin. I haven't been to many other academies, but it's part of what makes it so effective and forming change for other people, like really shaping the person that you become. So now let's go back to the story. Chana Senesh is walking at night back from the fields to the residence. And I want you to close your eyes and imagine the scene. The fields, everything is dark. There are no lights. There's no city. It's just a small kibbutz. And she's walking towards the houses. And Chana is describing how she sees the stars. And the stars are incredibly bright. And they're filling the entire night sky in Eretz Israel. Everywhere she looks up, she sees incredible stars. And they are her main lights. And they seem so close. They seem so incredibly powerful and so prominent in that moment. And she keeps on walking, looking at the stars, and she starts looking, and she sees on the ground, she sees small lights, and she starts hearing voices of laughter and talking. And those lights are the lights through the windows of the kibbutz of Sdot Yam. And she wrote about how the light of the stars seemed so close, and how the lights of the houses seemed so far away. And that story captivated me, because for me it talked both about how things that are the closest to us sometimes seem so far away, and things that are incredibly so far away seem so close to us. And it spoke to me about values, and about her values and mine, and how her values, those things that are incredibly huge and distant and through like a vast coldness, they seem so close in her life. But the personal engagement that she had were so far away. And she, in that moment, that thing that is the closest to us, the nuances of laughter and talking and lights and houses, in that moment it seemed so distant to her in an almost foreign way. And that description I keep interacting with it during my life in certain moments. I saw it in very difficult moments in my military service, where like I spent days, absolutely days, just crying my soul out. It was so incredible, difficult. Like the social experience of that part of my military service. But remembering that comfort that I felt through that text was incredibly powerful. Before I continue to the last part, to how that connects with the shlichut nowadays, this story is incredibly powerful for me, and I'd really like to hear what you think about it and what you saw through it, both about her, about Chana, and about the pioneer movement, and about maybe your own experiences. Okay. Yes, Ralph?
Yeah, I guess I could say that it reminded me one of the first few times I visited Israel, I did feel a comfort that I had a connection to these people far away, and yet I felt right at home. And then the thing about seeing the lights, it reminds me of times when I've been in Israel during a certain holiday, like a Hanukkah or something like that, walk through the streets and you see the bright lights, which may be a little bit analogous to what she was seeing, and you hear the sounds spilling out into the streets and just feeling, even though you were down the street, you just feel real close to. So that's the closest I have to those experiences. Over.
Your description, of your academy, in some ways is similar to what a lot of youth around here, the quote immersive summer experiences of overnight camp, except that it's not as hard. It's intense, but it's not hard intense. And it's an experience, I went to overnight camp as a kid, and it is an experience like no other, because you were with these kids 24/7. And at this point in my life, I couldn't imagine doing that because I really need time to myself once in a while. But it is, that intense experience is very formative. It does impact your life in ways, you'll figure out 50 years later. You're still going back to camp stuff. Then camp friends are lifetime friends. My sister is still friends with kids we went to camp with in the 70s.
The camp experience, and that's an incredible point. The camp experience is the only thing that I can compare in American culture to the pre-military academy. And I always say it's like a teeny tiny, extremely less political pre-military academy. Because as you're describing, there's something completely transformative, like you're a completely different person at the end of that experience. And I certainly have friends for life. It's been, how much is that now? Like 8 years almost since my pre-military academy. And we are still, to this very day, we have a WhatsApp group and we are in connection. And 2 of my group got married. I think really last month or something like that, and I got an invitation even though I haven't seen them both for like 6 years. So really, it is incredibly transformative. I agree. Karen, you wanted to say?
Yeah, I wanted to relate to your experiences and your analysis of Hannah. I think that you're absolutely right that she was must have been looking for herself. For those of you that don't know, I was part of a Garin, a group that started a kibbutz, and I was part of that group for 7 years, 4 years leading up to the establishment of the kibbutz, and then, 3 years leading up, and then 4 years, the first 4 years, and have maintained contact ever since then. And that was almost 50 years ago. It was definitely a transformative part of my life. And regardless of the reason that you may not feel comfortable in your, let's say, birth environment, when you go to a place where you're part of the beginning, suddenly you fit in. You're building it. So I can identify both with your comments about the military academy, and in particular about Hannah's desire, or not her desire, but her feeling of belonging, in spite of the fact that she misses her family.
Thank you. Yes,
Okay, go ahead.
Miriam, I really want us to continue.
Okay, this is going to be really quick.
Okay.
You're talking about the stars who are walking back. That is Yesh HaKokavim, right?
Yes.
The poem, Yesh HaKokavim.
Yes and no. So
Okay.
there's the segment that she wrote that's not a poem. That's in her journal, and there's also the song. I do believe there's a correlation there. That's why I said yes, but I don't know. Let's look back, and I'll just say that there's a lot of correlation also to the feelings of shlichut, but because it's far away and it's distant. And I think before we move on to the last segment, I'll just read a song called Baderech, On the Way. I'll read it in Hebrew and then in English. Kol kara vehalachti, halachti ki kara hakol, halachti leva lepol, אך על פרשת דרכים סתמתי אוזניי בלובן הקר, ובכיתי כי איבדתי דבר. That is, I think, the song that I absolutely, this is her most favorite poem that I have. And it says, a voice called, and I went. I went because it called. I went so I wouldn't fall. לבל אפול. אך על פרשת דרכים סתמתי אוזניי בלובן הקר. But on the crossroads, I closed my ears in the white coldness, and I cried because I lost something. So she's describing that need to go, I think, to go to Israel. And she's saying, I would have been lost if I wouldn't go, but I lost something on the way. And I completely, like, I see that in shlichut, and I see that in many aspects of my life. I know that I've lost a lot by going to the shlichut. Like when I first read this again, I think last year, it was after my grandmother died, and it was highly unexpected. It was instant. It was painless, but it was also like this feeling of shlichut. I read this and I kept on crying. So there's a lot of loss in transitioning into something completely different. And I think the loss she's talking about is not the material stuff, but it's someone she was. The last part that I want to say, and we won't read a lot here, is that at some point, Hannah saw that what is happening in Europe with the Holocaust was not something that she could ignore. And she became one of, how much is it? 24 women and 2 women who went on that mission. She joined through the British Army to do work with the intent of helping find intelligence for the British Army, but with a secret agenda of rescuing Jews in the Holocaust. And she was captured, and she was executed. And she managed to meet her mother for the first time after, I believe, 5 years. I think a week, or was it 2 weeks before she was executed? I'm not sure. And she wrote a lot of poems, and her last poem is right here. But I really felt connected to this one, and it is called Ashrei Hagafur. אשרי הגפרור שנשרף והצית להבות, אשרי הלהבה שבערה בסתרי לבבות, אשרי הלבבות שידעו לחדול בכבוד, אשרי הגפרור שנשרף והצית להבות. אשרי הגפרור means, אשרי is like, when I say אשריך is like, oh my God, I forgot my Hebrew. It's like, thanks to you, or thanks to you, not in like I'm thankful, but like because of that. So it's called because of the matchstick. Because of the matchstick that burned and ignited flames. Because of the flames, because of the flame that burned in the secrets of the hearts. Because of the hearts that knew to cease with dignity. Okay, I'm excited. Because of the matchsticks that burned and ignited flames. And if you were to ask me, I'm not a great Chana Senesh scholar, but I think she's talking about herself. She is the matchstick. She ignited the flames, and that flame that burned in her heart, and that heart knew when to cease. And she's talking about her death. She's talking about going. The flame is going to Israel and doing everything she can in Israel, and then recruiting, doing military training, and going and risking her life in Europe again, leaving her country to save the people, to save the individuals that are in danger. And there's something incredibly heroic and incredibly sad here about Ashrei Hagafur. But I take it as as something she was proud of, and not something she regretted. This is thankfulness. She's saying thank you for the matchstick, whether it's the values that ignited the hearts, my heart, or thank you for the people who lit the passion inside me. But she's saying everything was worth it. And I really think that if we're talking about both Chana Senesh and if we're talking about the intensity of being a pioneer, and also I'll say from my own experience, and the own prices that I paid for being here, being away from my family in very hard times, personally, but generally going away from Israel in a very, very difficult political time. And it's a different topic, but it was all worth it in the end. I think Chana is saying, and I'm saying it too. I'd really like to hear if you have any final thoughts, any final things that you agree or disagree on. And I thank you for being here.
Thank you, Idan, for sharing some very intense personal feelings and experiences. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adnan. Your last poem in English is "Blessed is the Match." That's "Blessed is the Match" is the quote official English translation.
Thank you.
Idan, maybe I missed when you mentioned this. This affected you very much when you were younger, right, as well as others. And of course, Hannah was kind of also a very young. Was that part of the connection, not just the pioneering? I mean, maybe if they set up some middle-aged pioneer, maybe it wouldn't have had the same impact. I don't know. Maybe you want a quick reflection on that and what that connection was.
So we did talk about it at the beginning, and I said that that's absolutely part of the connection. I'll just say for the record that my favorite one is Aleph Dalet Gordon, and he was 40 when he came to Israel, and I still found a very deep, very meaningful connection with him. But absolutely, I completely agree, and I said that was part of that was what was unique of hearing her thoughts and her doubts from a point of view which the teens of the Pure Military Academy could absolutely relate to, as people who left home to do something that is sometimes, at least for me, extremely the opposite of what I was raised in, from a completely apolitical environment to a highly political, highly progressive environment in all aspects. And it really is part of the things that I think the Pure Military Academy chose to connect with. Thank you for joining. I must be off for a different session. I really invite you. I'm doing 2 more sessions, one about progressive Judaism and another one in a week or 2 weeks. And my final one will be a more humorous one about, and it's called Cultures, a Joke. And me and the shlichim, one of the shlichot was like, I'm finishing 3 years here. Help me list all the weird things that Israelis do and all the weird things Americans do. And let's just sit around and laugh about it. And we just started writing, and it kept going for like a week. So there's a lot of weird stuff that Israelis do that are incredibly funny, and a lot of crazy stuff Americans do. So please feel free to join us.
תודה רבה.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Idan. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.